Today, I have the honour of speaking with Niall McGrath, and Niall is the Senior Director at Docusign Security Operations. And today we will chat about, can the pandemic have the Medici effect on cybersecurity? So hi Niall, how are you today?
Hi Patricia, thanks very much for the invitation. It's great to be here. Doing
Fantastic to have you, Niall. And first question for you today, Niall, is where are you located and what has been keeping you sane over the past few months of lockdown?
Yeah, I'm physically located here in Dublin. I'm working from the attic here, like Harry Potter would. And I think, you know, sanity can be redefined after the 12 or 13 or 14 months that we've all had. And I think what keeps me on the straight and narrow is really the kind of looking out for the kids. You know, it's particularly hard for the kids, you know, with the social distancing, and they want to meet their friends, etc., but cannot, you know, due to the restrictions. So it keeps me on the straight and narrow, looking out for them.
Brilliant, Niall. So you are the Senior Director at Docusign. Can you please tell our audience what kind of an effect has the pandemic had on your business?
Oh, it's been extremely positive, but I'd also like to acknowledge as well that the untold hardship and misery that the COVID has wreaked on families and businesses. But for sure, Patricia, it's actually propelled Docusign's core business model center stage, really. And when you think they originated from a kind of electronic digital signature service, and they evolved their tooling into a cloud offering, to give us what they call the agreement cloud. And that agreement is that process where you take documents, contracts, you modify them, you edit them, you have a number of participants, you can redline your contracts, and then you digitally sign them. And then the process after signing, like renewing, etc., takes place. But absolutely, you said it right there, that due to the restrictions of COVID, you know, no traveling, nobody's allowed travel, the physical social distancing really has kind of put Docusign's business model center stage there, you know, because it's in its essence, it is that provider of trust, a means of authenticating and verifying, you know, the authenticity of transactions, for example, in business. And the wheels of industry don't stop, you know, they continue rolling even faster. And even
I'm sure. Okay, I'm sure our audience will have a lot of questions about that, Niall. Niall, I want to move you on, please, Niall, to your title, if that's okay, in our 5 minutes.
Yeah.
What do you mean by the pandemic having the Medici effect on cybersecurity?
Yeah, that unfortunately I can't claim for coining this phrase, but the Medici effect is a byword or a phrase for interdisciplinarity, actually, you know. And the phrase was coined by a guy called Franz Johansson, and he was offering some form of analysis into the dynamics of interdisciplinarity and how you can manage and lead to innovation, for example. And we all remember our history lessons, and that the Medici family of the 15th century Florence, they essentially bankrolled the biggest interdisciplinarity project ever the world has seen. And they commissioned craftsmen and craftswomen from all over, you know, from a variety of disciplines, like sculptors, writers, artists, painters, you name it, scientists, you know, doctors, inventors, etc. And this resulted in an explosion of innovation and what we've come to know as the Renaissance period in history. But in terms of the here and now and the pandemic that we're going through at the moment, our vernacular has certainly changed completely in the last year or so. You know, we've terms and phrases like immunization, immunology, vaccination, vaccines, PCR testing, epidemics, you name it, take it what you want. But so this led me and a group of friends to think and believe that there must be some relationship or connection between malware infection, you know, malware infection on a computer, on a network of computers, and a biological infection, you know. So a group of us went about looking and modeling computer behavior and expressing it as a DNA sequencing, you know, as a DNA sequencing. And this is where we applied the Medici effect to cybersecurity. And I can tell you a bit more later about that.
Yeah, I'm sure our audience will have a lot of questions about that. And as you know, from interacting with us in Discovery, we are incredibly passionate about interdisciplinarity. But in terms of cybersecurity, in terms of, you know, how can interdisciplinarity have an effect on cybersecurity?
Oh, definitely. It can have all positive effects. And it's pretty center stage as well at the moment, because we have, you know, in security, in incident response, we'll say, in the resolution of an incident, you'll have a variety of subject matter experts on that kind of pipeline, on that kind of conveyor belt, if you like. And you'd have security analysts, you could have product designers, product engineers, human resource people, legal people, compliance people, and together they kind of make a decision and adjudicate on the incident, you know, and that's a whole kind of hotbed of interdisciplinarity right there. But then it might take on another aspect as well, where there's an obligation to notify externally to customers and to regulatory bodies, and that iterates again into another kind of version of interdisciplinarity, because your customers could be coming from different environments and different industrial sectors.
Okay, and we have a lot of questions coming in, Niall. Neil, so apologies. There are so many questions coming in. So maybe we'll just move on to them, if that's okay, Neil. So here's a very interesting one to kick off. International police forces use your software, tools and methodologies in the investigation of encrypted material and also in the training of their analysts, operators. What is this encrypted material? What software did you invent to detect it, and why?
Yeah, it comes from my passion in cybersecurity, basically. This is the motivation, you know, and I'll give you a bit about the motivation behind it. And when you think about cyber society and non-cyber society, cyber society is very unregulated, and there's no really governing, presiding kind of rule of the land. And law enforcement really has its kind of limits in kind of reaching and dispensing law, if you like. So, and this is rich and fertile ground for criminals to operate in, and to operate with impunity, actually. And I think it's very much incumbent on us to protect ourselves and to protect our data. And there's the passion from, you know, the passion perspective. The tools itself in encryption is used really positively for financial transactions. Then that's the good side, you know, and society can go about its business. But criminals can abuse encryption too, and they can disseminate malware, for example, this way, and it goes undetected because it's encoded. And encryption can be used as well for much more illegal goals as well. For example, the dissemination of terrorist-related information, you know. And so we went about developing tools that could not necessarily brute forcing or doing a cryptanalysis attack on defeating the encryption, but actually looking at it from a different perspective and kind of looking at the kind of the parameters. I wrote some tools like in Java, in Python, where we could actually go and we could interrogate and parse encrypted material for information that we could use in the investigative cycle, you know, things that can give us evidential value.
Okay, now Neil, we have a lot of questions coming in, so I'm going to try my best to get through them. So let's kind of, I suppose we'll move to more quick fire questions in terms of, so what is the worst thing that could happen if there was a major security breach at Docusign?
The worst thing that could happen is really from a company perspective, the availability of the service. You know, there's an expectation that, especially in cloud, in the SaaS world of cloud deployment, there's an expectation by your customer that you're available 100% of the time. And it can be disastrous if anything below 100%. In fact, there's unspoken rules that we cannot dip below the 5 nines. That's 99.999% availability. So that's disastrous. That's
interesting. And here's another question. So there's lots of questions around this. We'll try and get through them all. How is the risk of changing file formats addressed when signed contracts need to be archived for many years? Interesting question.
That's a very interesting question, and it's very insightful as well. But what it comes down to, really, regardless of your file content or the types of your file, what happens is that it gets boiled down, or gets whatever, if it's a PDF document, a Word document, a text document, whatever, it gets boiled down to a common normalized format and gets stored there. And the encryption process then would process that kind of proprietary format, if you like, and it would contain that, it would have that content the documents content or contracts content, and then the encryption process. So it boils it down to a common format that we can work with. Good question.
Okay, interesting, Neil. So here's another one. There are still lots of limitations in Irish law, which mean Docusign cannot be used in many legal transactions. Example, anything involving real property. How much policy, lobbying, etc., policy change, I suppose, needs to be done to change the law to move with the times?
That's a very, very good question. And you know what? If we kind of go around and answer that question obliquely, and if we go to the kind of that situation in the USA and remote online notary, this is another kind of evolution in the Docusign product itself, and this has just recently come online. And there is a very strong lobbying group for that here in Europe, and it's extremely strong and very vocal, and so much so there's an argument pretty much, you know, against not having it because of the even back in the year 2000, where the Electronic Commercial Act, signed in by Bertie Ahern and Bill Clinton, this paved the way and opened the gates for something like this. So I don't think that there'll be a wave of obstruction in that area.
Okay.
It's very strong in the United States, and that's actually kept and rocketed in the United States, you know, remote online notary services.
So, okay, very interesting, Neil. Are we always a step ahead of cybercrime or a step behind it? And related to that, has the pandemic increased cybercrime? So two very kind of similar questions there.
Yeah, and definitely in terms of the pandemic and the advent, when even before COVID, you know, when we would go to the office and we would log in, we would bring our laptops and we would log into the office, the enterprise infrastructure, into the network, so to speak. That was traditionally the perimeter. That was the attack surface, if you like. Now, with everyone working from home, the attack surface and the perimeter now is spread out to people's houses, to people's attics, you know, and this is actually, the challenge is different now, you know, in terms of the managing and controlling the attack surface. But in terms of being a step ahead and being current with the attack trends, we have a variety of tooling, but we also have capabilities with we'll say threat intelligence. You know, we have advanced threat intelligence services, you know, monitoring the deep web, the dark deep web, for example, and identifying and attributing sources of attack and potential attacks, and, you know, getting out in front of that proactively and stopping and blocking that. Actually,
that's really interesting, Neil, because there's another question here. Are police forces equipped to adequately deal with cybercrime? So kind of, maybe you could talk about that for about 30 seconds.
That is a very good question. And to be honest, you know, this is a question really that's how willing are we to juggle with our civil liberties? And there are some countries that have civil liberties, and there are some countries that value kind of the nation's defense, right? And that's the kind of the slide here in between. In Europe, we're probably erring towards you know, civil liberties, and like when I'm talking about surveillance, etc. Other countries are pretty much on the country's defense, etc., in terms of surveillance. But that's a civil liberties question. Technologically, I think the police forces around the world, Interpols of this world, and the various agencies are very, very well equipped if they're allowed to apply their technologies. And surveillance is a number one tool in the policing arm, and whether they're allowed legally to deploy that or not is always the question. You know, if you look over to the USA and the US Patriots Act post 9/11, it's given them pretty much that kind of authority to be able to go and collect evidence on foot of suspicion even. And that has given a lot of kind of civil unrest as well, because people believe that they have a right to privacy, but police forces that are standing pretty much on the nation's defense say, well, actually, it's our right to kind of monitor you and to surveil you. So that's a very interesting question. I think the police forces are technologically advanced to do that.
And actually, you know what, it really shows the power of interdisciplinarity, and when you need to bring people from different disciplines together, like your Medici effect. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, we are completely out of time, but I do want to finish up on one particular question that's a personal question for me. So it's, you survived the Great Hansen earthquake, which was 7.2 on the Richter scale, and that was in Osaka in Japan in 1995 when you were living there. So do you want to tell our audience what was that actually like?
Oh, I'll tell you, it's a fun fact of mine at the moment, but it wasn't fun at the time in
I'd say it was
1995.
not fun at all, Niall.
It wasn't. And the epicenter of that was in a place called Kobe. And that's 150 kilometers from where I was based in Osaka, in a place called Tondabayashi. And just to give you an idea of the impact that seismic shift had on the geography, was 150 kilometers away. And I had some stuff up on the shelf, that all of that shelf came down on top of me when I was asleep. And naturally enough, we woke up, and it was absolutely crazy, pandemonium, you know. And obviously there was a lot of untold misery there as well, you know. But you know, you muck in, you help, you survive, you know. It's taught me some some very important life skills, like resilience and wanting to survive in life, and enjoying life, but and also looking out for the not so well off as well.
What a way! Wow, Niall, what a way to finish. And we're completely out of time. Sincere apologies to all those who've questions I didn't get to. I just want to take this opportunity to say a huge thank you, Niall, for the most fascinating discussion today.
Thank you very much. The honor, the privilege is mine. Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much. And thanks to everyone for joining in. You can sign up for our series at zoomforthought.ie, where you can see our list of upcoming speakers. Thanks so much, everyone, and see you all next week on Zoom for Thought.
Thank you.
Thanks.